Elias and Kayla worked tirelessly through the night, piecing together fragments of evidence that painted an increasingly damning picture. The more they uncovered, the clearer it became. Admiral Rintal wasn't just complicit in the Veil's operations, she was orchestrating them. Every transaction, every coded message, every weapon blueprint pointed to her as the mastermind behind the conspiracy. But exposing her wouldn't be enough. They needed irrefutable proof that even the Coalition's highest authorities couldn't ignore. By dawn, Kayla had compiled a dossier, a digital file containing everything they'd found. "This is our smoking gun," she said, securing the data onto a secure drive. "But getting it out there without tipping off Rintal's spies will be tricky." Elias nodded, his expression grim. "We leak it anonymously, spread it across communication channels so fast no one can trace it back to us." Kayla raised an eyebrow. "Bold move. If anyone connects this to you, you're done for." "I'm already done for if we don't act," Elias replied. "If Orion's pride falls into the Veil's hands, billions die. We can't let that happen." They agreed to split up temporarily. Kayla would stay behind to monitor the fallout while Elias prepared to board the cruiser. With time running out before departure, he knew he had to get aboard somehow, even if it meant sneaking on undetected. As Kayla uploaded the files to public networks disguised as routine maintenance logs, chaos erupted almost instantly. News outlets across the galaxy lit up with headlines about corruption within the Coalition's ranks. Rumors swirled about Admiral Rintal's involvement, sparking outrage among civilians and lower-ranking officers alike. Protesters gathered outside Coalition headquarters, demanding answers. Meanwhile, aboard Orion's Pride, whispers of dissent began spreading among the crew. Many were loyal to Rintal, but others questioned her leadership. Tensions simmered beneath the surface, waiting for a spark to ignite them. Back at the spaceport, Elias made his way toward the cruiser under cover of distraction caused by the scandal. Disguised as a maintenance worker thanks to forged credentials provided by Kayla, he slipped past security checkpoints and boarded unnoticed. He hid among cargo crates in the lower decks, listening intently for any sign of trouble. Hours passed uneventfully until a sudden announcement blared over the ship's intercom. "Attention all personnel. A fugitive has been spotted attempting to infiltrate this vessel. Be on high alert." Elias froze. Someone must have recognized him during his attempt to board, or worse, Rintal had anticipated his move. Security teams began sweeping the ship systematically, their heavy boots echoing through the corridors. Trapped and outnumbered, Elias realized he'd underestimated how quickly the Admiral would retaliate. Just when he thought escape was impossible, a voice crackled softly in his earpiece, a comms device Kayla had given him earlier. "You've got company heading your way," she warned. "Use the ventilation shafts. I've mapped a route to the engineering bay where you'll be safer." Elias didn't hesitate. Grabbing a toolkit left nearby, he pried open a vent panel and crawled inside. The narrow passage reeked of oil and stale air, but it offered concealment. As shouts echoed below, he moved silently, following Kayla's directions. Reaching the engineering bay, he dropped down cautiously, only to find himself face to face with two engineers, one human, one alien, who stared at him in shock. Before they could raise the alarm, Elias held up his hands. "I'm not here to hurt anyone," he said firmly. "But if you want to live, you'll listen to what I have to say." The engineers exchanged wary glances but stayed silent. Taking a deep breath, Elias explained everything. The conspiracy, Rintal's betrayal, and the danger looming over them all. To his relief, they listened. Unbeknownst to Elias, however, Admiral Rintal watched the unfolding events from her command center, a cold smile playing on her lips. She had expected resistance, but not from someone like him. "Interesting," she murmured to herself. "Let's see how far you get, Captain Venn." The game of cat and mouse had only just begun. The cantina grew louder as Elias slipped the data chip into his pocket, careful not to draw attention. His mind raced with questions. Who had left it? Why him? And what could it possibly contain that required such secrecy? The weight of the tiny device felt heavier than it should, as if it carried the answers to mysteries far beyond his understanding. He finished his drink quickly and paid the bartender. A gruff nod was all he received in return, and made his way outside. The spaceport's corridors were still bustling, but Elias found a quiet corner near a maintenance hatch. Pulling out the chip, he inserted it into a small handheld scanner he always carried. A flicker of light illuminated the screen, revealing encrypted files. After several tense moments, the encryption cracked, spilling forth fragments of classified information. What he saw chilled him to the bone. The files detailed an imminent attack on Orion's pride. Maps, schematics, and timestamps pointed to a precise plan orchestrated by an enigmatic group known only as the Veil. Names of key coalition leaders aboard the ship were highlighted, targets marked for assassination or capture. There was even mention of experimental weapons stored deep within the cruiser's cargo hold, weapons capable of destabilizing entire star systems. Elias leaned against the wall, his breath shallow. This wasn't just some random act of sabotage. This was a calculated strike designed to cripple the coalition's leadership. If these plans came to fruition, chaos would ripple across the galaxy. Billions could suffer. But why give this information to him? A human soldier denied entry onto the very ship targeted for destruction. Was this a test? A trap? Or did someone believe he was the only one who could stop it? Before he could process further, footsteps echoed down the corridor. He turned sharply to see a cloaked figure approaching. The same one from the cantina. The hood concealed their face, but their movements were deliberate, unhurried. Elias instinctively reached for the blaster holstered at his side. "Relax," the figure said, their voice low and distorted. "I'm not here to hurt you." "Then what do you want?" Elias demanded, his grip tightening on the weapon. "To warn you," the figure replied, stepping closer. They pulled back their hood, revealing Kayla Zoreth, a rogue engineer Elias vaguely recognized from old mission reports. Her reputation preceded her: brilliant, unpredictable, and fiercely independent. Rumors claimed she once worked for the Coalition before disappearing into the shadows. "You're playing a dangerous game," Kayla continued, glancing around nervously. "That chip you have, it's more than just intel. It's proof. Proof that the Veil isn't just an external threat. They're operating from within the Coalition itself." Elias frowned. "What are you talking about?" She crossed her arms, her expression grim. "Admiral Rintal. She's involved. I don't know how deep it goes, but if you expose her, you'll unravel everything." Elias stared at her, trying to gauge whether she was telling the truth. "Why tell me this? Why not go to someone higher up?" Kayla smirked bitterly. "Because no one listens to people like us. Humans get brushed aside, and rogues like me are ignored unless we're useful. But you've got nothing to lose." Her words struck a nerve. She was right. He had been cast aside, dismissed without a second thought. Yet here he was, holding evidence that could change the course of galactic history. "If we're going to stop them," Kayla added, lowering her voice, "we'll need help. People we can trust. Supplies. Weapons. Are you ready for that?" Elias hesitated for only a moment before nodding. Whatever lay ahead, he knew one thing for certain: walking away wasn't an option. Not anymore. As Kayla disappeared into the crowd, Elias tucked the scanner back into his pocket. The weight of the data chip pressed against his leg, a constant reminder of the storm brewing on the horizon. For now, though, he needed time to think and prepare. The whispers of war had grown louder, and soon they'd become screams. The fallout from Elias's broadcast rippled across the galaxy like a shockwave. The Coalition, once seen as an unshakable pillar of order, was now exposed as a fractured institution riddled with corruption and betrayal. Protests erupted on countless worlds, demanding justice and reform. Humans, long marginalized by the Coalition's elitist hierarchy, began to rise up, their voices louder than ever before. For the first time in decades, Humanity found itself at the forefront of galactic politics, not as victims, but as leaders of change. Elias watched it all unfold from the command center of Orion's Pride. The ship had become a symbol of resistance, its crew united under a shared cause. Lieutenant Mara stood beside him, her arms crossed as she observed the live feed streaming in from across the galaxy. "It's working," she said quietly. "People are waking up." Kayla leaned against a nearby console, her sharp eyes scanning the data flowing through her terminal. "For now," she replied cautiously. "But don't forget, the veil isn't gone. They're retreating into the shadows, regrouping. This fight's far from over." Elias nodded grimly. He knew she was right. Exposing Rintal and the Veil's operations had dealt a significant blow, but it wasn't enough to dismantle the network entirely. Still, for the first time in his life, he felt a sense of purpose beyond survival. This wasn't just about stopping an enemy. It was about building something better. Zara fluttered down from the ceiling, landing gracefully near them. Her feathers shimmered faintly, catching the dim light of the command center. "What's next?" she asked. "We've shaken the foundations, but we need direction. A plan." Elias turned to face the group, his expression resolute. "We keep fighting. Not just against the Veil, but for unity, for a galaxy where no one is left behind because of their species or status. We start small, rebuilding trust within the coalition, rooting out sleeper agents, and ensuring transparency at every level. But we also look outward, to those who've been ignored or oppressed. If we can inspire others to join us, maybe we can create real change." Lieutenant Mara smiled faintly. "Sounds like you're already planning your next mission." "It's not my mission," Elias corrected. "It's ours. All of ours." Kor grunted approvingly, cracking his knuckles. "Count me in. I've got nothing better to do than smash some heads." Kayla smirked, though there was warmth in her gaze. "You'll have to drag me kicking and screaming if you think I'm leaving now. Someone's got to keep you idiots alive." Despite the challenges ahead, a sense of camaraderie filled the room. These unlikely allies had started as strangers, thrown together by circumstance, but they had forged bonds stronger than steel. Together, they represented hope, a beacon of possibility in a fractured galaxy. In the days that followed, Orion's Pride became more than just a cruiser. It transformed into a mobile base for resistance efforts. Under Elias's leadership, the crew worked tirelessly to track down remnants of the Veil while spreading awareness and aid to marginalized communities. Their actions inspired others to take a stand, igniting movements across star systems. As the ship prepared to depart for its next destination, Elias stood on the observation deck, gazing out at the endless expanse of stars. Kayla joined him silently, leaning against the railing. "You know," she said after a moment, "for someone who got kicked off this ship once, you sure made yourself at home." Elias chuckled softly. "Guess I'm stubborn like that." She glanced at him, her tone lighter. "Stubborn or not, you've earned your place here. Just don't get too comfortable. We've got a lot of work ahead." He nodded, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Somewhere out there, the Veil lurked, plotting their next move. But Elias wasn't afraid. For the first time, he wasn't fighting alone, and that made all the difference. As the engines roared to life and Orion's Pride soared into the void, Elias reflected on how one act of defiance could spark a revolution. The road ahead would be long and fraught with danger, but he was ready. Whatever came next, he'd face it head-on, with courage, determination, and the unwavering belief that even in the darkest times, a new dawn was always possible. The spaceport was alive with the hum of activity. Alien merchants shouted over one another, their voices blending into a cacophony of strange tongues. Shuttles drifted in and out of docking bays like fireflies in the night sky. The air smelled faintly of ozone and polished metal, a scent that had become familiar to Captain Elias Ven over his years of service. But today, it felt different. Today, it carried an edge of rejection. Elias stood at the boarding ramp of Orion's Pride, a gleaming cruiser reserved for the elite officers and dignitaries of the Galactic Coalition. His uniform, though clean, bore signs of wear, patches sewn hastily, medals dulled by time. Beside him, towering aliens adorned in shimmering armor moved effortlessly past, their presence commanding respect. Humans were rare here, seen as inferior by many species within the Coalition. And yet Elias had earned every stripe on his sleeve through sacrifice and bloodshed. "Your credentials are invalid," said the attendant, a slender insectoid creature with iridescent wings. Its voice buzzed like static. "This vessel is for authorized personnel only." Elias clenched his jaw but kept his tone steady. "I'm Captain Ilias Venn, Alliance Forces. My orders clearly state I'm to report aboard." The attendant tilted its head, antennae twitching. It tapped on a holographic screen floating before it, then shook its head. "No record found. You'll need to vacate the area immediately." He wanted to argue, to demand answers, but he knew better. Arguing wouldn't change anything, not when humans were treated as second-class citizens in this part of the galaxy. Instead, he stepped back, letting the crowd swallow him whole. As he walked away, he could feel eyes on him, some mocking, others indifferent. A nearby group of reptilian warriors snickered behind clawed hands. "Looks like the little human got kicked off," one sneered in broken common tongue. Elias ignored them, focusing instead on the weight of disappointment pressing down on his chest. He had fought wars, risked his life countless times, and now, this. Denied entry because of who, or what, he was born as. He found himself wandering toward the cantina, a dimly lit corner of the spaceport where shadows danced across scarred tables. Here, no one cared about rank or species. Everyone was just trying to survive. Sliding onto a stool, he ordered something strong from the bartender, a hulking quadruped alien with too many eyes. As he sipped the bitter drink, fragments of conversation drifted his way. Someone mentioned the Veil, a name whispered in fear across the galaxy. Rumors spoke of an unknown enemy targeting Coalition leaders, leaving no trace behind. Another voice chimed in, claiming Orion's pride might be next. Elias froze. Why would anyone target such a heavily guarded ship? His instincts screamed that something wasn't right. That's when he noticed a figure watching him from across the room, a hooded individual who quickly vanished into the crowd. Moments later, Elias felt something beneath his glass. A small data chip lay there, glowing faintly. Curiosity burned inside him. What did it mean? Who left it? One thing was certain. Whatever secrets it held, they weren't meant for anyone else. For the first time since being turned away, Elias felt a spark of hope ignite within him. Maybe, just maybe, fate hadn't abandoned him after all. The next few hours blurred together for Elias as he navigated the labyrinthine corridors of the spaceport. His mind churned with possibilities, each more dangerous than the last. Kayla's warning echoed in his thoughts. The Veil isn't just an external threat. If Admiral Rintal was involved, then this conspiracy reached far higher than he'd imagined. But proving it wouldn't be easy. He needed someone who could decipher the encrypted files further, someone skilled enough to uncover hidden connections without raising suspicion. Kayla Zoreth wasn't exactly the ally he would have chosen, but she was all he had right now. And deep down, he knew she was right about one thing. Trust was a luxury neither of them could afford. Still, survival depended on cooperation, for now. He found her where she said she'd be, in a dimly lit repair bay tucked away from the main thoroughfares. The air smelled of grease and burnt circuits, and tools lay scattered across workbenches cluttered with half-finished projects. Kayla stood hunched over a dismantled droid, her hands moving deftly as sparks flew from its exposed wiring. "You're late," she muttered without looking up. "I thought you might have chickened out." Elias stepped closer, keeping his voice low. "I don't run from fights. You know that." She glanced at him briefly, her sharp green eyes narrowing. "Good, because what we're about to do, it's not going to be pretty." Elias handed her the data chip. Can you dig deeper into these files? Find anything linking Rintal directly to the Veil? Kayla took the chip and examined it closely before inserting it into a portable terminal rigged to her workstation. Lines of code scrolled across the screen faster than Elias could follow. She worked silently, her focus absolute. Minutes passed like hours until she finally leaned back with a sigh. "This is bad," she said flatly. "Really bad. Look here." She pointed to a series of transactions buried deep within the Coalition's financial records. Massive sums funneled through shell corporations, all traced back to accounts linked to Rintal's command structure. "And this," she added, pulling up another file. "Blueprints for those experimental weapons you saw earlier. They're marked with symbols matching reports of attacks by the Veil. Someone high up is arming them, and using Coalition resources to do it." Elias felt a cold knot form in his stomach. So Rintal's selling us out to consolidate power. Classic betrayal. "Not just power," Kayla corrected. "Control. If the Veil destabilizes the galaxy, they'll blame it on external forces. Then Rintal swoops in as the savior, uniting everyone under her banner. It's genius, if you're ruthless enough." Elias clenched his fists. "We can't let that happen." "No kidding," Kayla shot back. "But taking her down won't be easy. She's got spies everywhere. One wrong move, and we're dead or worse." Despite their shared goal, tension crackled between them. Kayla clearly didn't trust him fully, and Elias couldn't blame her. Trust came hard when lives were on the line. Yet there was something unspoken binding them, a mutual understanding that failure wasn't an option. "What's the plan?" Elias asked after a long pause. Kayla smirked faintly. "First, we gather proof undeniable even for the most stubborn skeptics. Second, we find allies. Not many, just a few reliable ones. Third," she hesitated, her expression darkening. "Third, we prepare for war. Because once we expose this, there won't be any turning back." Elias nodded grimly. War was nothing new to him. But this fight felt different. This time, it wasn't just about survival, it was about justice. For himself, for humanity, and for every being exploited by those in power. As they began sorting through the data again, Elias allowed himself a brief moment of hope. Perhaps fate hadn't abandoned him after all. With Kayla's ingenuity and his determination, they might stand a chance against the shadows closing in around them. Little did they know, their actions were already being watched. Somewhere aboard Orion's Pride, unseen eyes tracked their every move, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. With Admiral Rintal detained and the experimental weapons disabled, Elias and his allies turned their attention to the fallout. The mutiny aboard Orion's Pride had left the ship fractured, both physically and ideologically. Crew members who had once followed orders without question now found themselves questioning everything they knew about the Coalition and its leadership. Elias stood in the command center, surrounded by a mix of loyalists turned rebels and those still hesitant to fully trust him. Lieutenant Mara approached, her expression weary but resolute. "What now?" she asked. "We've stopped Rintal, but this goes deeper than just one person." Elias nodded grimly. "She's right. The Veil isn't just an enemy outside the Coalition. It's a network embedded within it. Rintal may have been orchestrating this particular plot, but she wasn't working alone." Kayla's voice crackled over the comm system. "I've accessed more files from Rintal's private database. It's worse than we thought. There are sleeper agents across the galaxy embedded in every level of the Coalition. They're waiting for the signal to act." Zira landed gracefully beside them, folding her shimmering wings. "If that's true, then exposing her won't be enough. We need to take down the Veil entirely, or risk another betrayal." Elias clenched his fists, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "How? We can't fight an invisible enemy spread across star systems." "By making sure everyone knows the truth," Kayla interjected. "Rintal wanted chaos, but we can use that against her. Release all the evidence publicly, not just about her, but about the Veil's operations. Let the galaxy decide what happens next. It was a bold move, one that carried immense risks. Exposing such widespread corruption would shake the foundations of the coalition, potentially plunging the galaxy into even greater instability. But Elias knew there was no other choice. Secrets like these couldn't stay buried forever. They'd only fester and grow. "We'll broadcast it live," Elias said finally. "Every channel, every frequency. No hiding, no censorship. If people see the truth, maybe they'll demand change." Lieutenant Mara hesitated. "And if they don't? What if they turn on us instead?" "Then we fight for justice anyway," Elias replied firmly. "This isn't about us anymore. It's about standing up for what's right, even if it costs us everything." Over the next few hours, the crew worked together to prepare the broadcast. Kayla compiled damning evidence, video footage, financial records, intercepted messages, all pointing to the Veil's infiltration of the coalition. Zyra assisted by rerouting signals to ensure maximum reach, while Kor patrolled the corridors to prevent any last-ditch attempts by remaining loyalists to sabotage their efforts. Finally, the moment came. Standing before a camera rigged in the command center, Elias took a deep breath. Behind him, the scared faces of his newfound allies reflected determination and hope. He began speaking, his voice steady despite the enormity of the task ahead. "This is Captain Elias Venn of the Galactic Coalition Alliance Forces. What you're about to see will challenge everything you believe about our leaders and ourselves. Admiral Rintal betrayed us all, but she is not the only threat. The Veil operates from within, sowing division and destruction. This conspiracy reaches higher than anyone imagined. But today, we expose it. Today, we choose transparency over tyranny." As the broadcast went live, reactions poured in from across the galaxy. Some viewers erupted in outrage, demanding accountability. Others dismissed the claims as propaganda or conspiracy theories. Protests broke out near coalition headquarters, with citizens calling for reform or revolution. Back aboard Orion's Pride, Elias watched the feed silently. For the first time, he allowed himself a flicker of hope. Change wouldn't come easily, but the truth had been set free. And sometimes, that was enough to spark a new dawn. Little did he know, the Veil was already adapting, preparing for the next phase of their plan. The battle was far from over, but Elias and his allies were ready to face whatever came next. The command center was a battleground of conflicting loyalties. Officers shouted over one another, some demanding order while others called for Rintal's arrest. Smoke curled from damaged consoles, and the faint hum of emergency systems filled the air. Amidst the chaos, Elias stood at the heart of it all, his blaster still raised, but his focus shifting to maintaining control. "We need to secure this ship," Elias declared, his voice cutting through the noise. "If Rintal escapes, she'll find a way to finish what she started. We can't let that happen." Lieutenant Mara nodded firmly, rallying those who had sided with them. "Split into teams. Secure key areas, engineering, weapons storage, and communications. Don't let anyone loyal to Rintal regain control." Kor cracked his knuckles again, his reptilian eyes glinting with determination. "I'll take the lower decks. No one gets past me." Zyra spread her shimmering wings, ready to take flight. "I'll cover the upper levels and keep an eye out for Rintal. She won't slip away easily." As the group dispersed, Elias turned to Lieutenant Mara. "We stay here. If we lose the command center, we lose everything." Mara agreed, her expression grim. Together, they fortified their position, barricading doors and setting up makeshift defenses using whatever they could salvage from the damaged consoles. The tension was palpable. Every sound outside the room set nerves on edge. Meanwhile, Kayla worked tirelessly from her hidden workstation, monitoring the ship's systems and guiding the resistance. Through hacked cameras, she tracked movement aboard Orion's Pride, feeding critical information to Elias and the others. Her voice crackled over the comms system, urgent but calm. "Rintal's heading toward the cargo bay. Looks like she's trying to access the experimental weapons. Elias clenched his jaw. If she gets those weapons operational, we're finished. Without hesitation, he and Mara moved out, navigating the dimly lit corridors with precision. Every step felt heavier than the last, the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. He knew failure wasn't an option, not when the fate of billions hung in the balance. Reaching the cargo bay, they found Rintal standing near a massive crate, her hands flying over a control panel. Behind her, several armed guards kept watch. She glanced up, unsurprised to see them. "Persistent to the end, aren't you, Captain?" she sneered. "Stand down." Rintal, Elias ordered, his blaster trained on her. "It's over." She laughed coldly. "Over? You think exposing me changes anything? The galaxy is fractured, weak. My vision will prevail, with or without me." Before either side could act, Kor burst into the room, roaring like a storm. His sheer size and ferocity scattered the guards, giving Elias and Mara the opening they needed. In the ensuing struggle, Rintal fought back with surprising skill, her movements calculated and deadly. But Elias matched her blow for blow, driven by a fire that refused to be extinguished. Finally, after a grueling exchange, Elias disarmed her, pinning her to the ground. Breathing heavily, he looked down at her defiant face. "Your game ends here." For the first time, uncertainty flickered in Rintal's eyes. "You've made a grave mistake, Captain," she whispered. "The veil doesn't stop with me." Her words sent a chill through the room, but Elias didn't waver. Handcuffing her, he turned to the others. "Secure her and disable these weapons. We're not done yet." As the mutiny continued across the ship, alliances shifted and power struggles erupted. Yet amidst the turmoil, one thing became clear. The coalition would never be the same again. And Elias knew that their victory today was only the beginning of a much larger fight. The engineering bay was dimly lit, the hum of machinery filling the silence as Elias stood before the two engineers. Sweat trickled down his temple, but he kept his voice steady. "I know this sounds insane," he said, "but if you check the public channels, you'll see I'm telling the truth. Admiral Rintal is using Orion's pride to destabilize the galaxy. If we don't stop her, everyone on this ship, including you, is expendable." The human engineer, a wiry man with grease-streaked overalls, frowned skeptically. "Why should we believe you? You're just some guy sneaking around like a thief." Elias clenched his jaw, but forced himself to stay calm. He pulled out the secure drive Kayla had given him and handed it over. "Here, look at this. It's all there. Transactions, weapon blueprints, everything linking Rintal to the Veil. Decide for yourselves." The alien engineer, a tall, insectoid being with multiple arms, plugged the drive into a terminal. Data streamed across the screen, revealing incriminating details that even the most jaded skeptic couldn't dismiss. The human engineer's eyes widened in disbelief. This changes everything." "Yeah," Elias said grimly. "And it gets worse. Security knows I'm here. They'll find me. And probably you too, if we don't act fast." The two engineers exchanged uneasy glances. Finally, the human spoke up. "What do you need us to do?" Relief washed over Elias. "First, I need access to the ship's systems. If we can disable key security protocols, I can move without drawing attention. Second, spread the word among trusted crew members. We can't take down Rintal alone. We'll need help from anyone willing to fight back." The insectoid nodded sharply. "I'll handle the systems. But be warned, tampering with them will trigger alerts sooner or later." "I'll deal with that when it happens," Elias replied. "Just buy me time." As the engineers got to work, Elias slipped further into the shadows, keeping watch near the entrance. His heart pounded as distant shouts echoed through the corridors. Security teams were closing in, their boots clanging against metal floors. Every second counted. Minutes later, the human engineer signaled him. "Done. Security cameras are looped in this section, and internal sensors are scrambled. You've got about 10 minutes before they override it. Elias nodded gratefully. Good work. Stay safe, and keep spreading the message. With renewed determination, he moved deeper into the ship, navigating through darkened hallways until he reached the restricted area marked on Kayla's map. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing rows of crates stamped with Coalition insignias. Inside, experimental weapons gleamed ominously under faint emergency lights, weapons designed to annihilate entire planets. Elias cursed under his breath. This was worse than he'd imagined. If these fell into enemy hands, the consequences would be catastrophic. He snapped photos and recorded footage, ensuring he had undeniable evidence of Rintal's betrayal. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the ship. Red warning lights flashed, bathing the corridor in an eerie glow. Someone had discovered his presence. Heavy footsteps thundered closer, accompanied by shouted orders. Thinking quickly, Elias ducked behind a crate and activated his comms device. Kayla, uncompromised. Where are you? Her voice crackled urgently in response. Head to Deck 7. Section 12. There's a hidden access tunnel leading to the lower levels. Hurry, they're locking down the upper decks. Elias sprinted toward the designated location, narrowly avoiding laser fire as security drones descended from above. Bullets ricocheted off walls, forcing him to zigzag unpredictably. Adrenaline surged through his veins as he dove into the narrow tunnel moments before blast doors sealed shut behind him. Breathing heavily, he leaned against the cool metal wall. For now, he was safe, but the battle was far from over. Somewhere above, Admiral Rintal watched the chaos unfold, confident in her control. What she didn't realize was that Elias wasn't fighting just to survive anymore. He was fighting to expose the truth, no matter the cost. The command center erupted into chaos as guards swarmed in, their weapons trained on Elias and his small group. Lieutenant Mara stepped forward protectively, her hands raised but her stance defiant. Stand down, she shouted at the guards. This isn't about loyalty to Rintal. It's about saving billions of lives. But the guards didn't hesitate. They were loyal to the chain of command, blind to anything else. Kor growled low in his throat, muscles coiled like a spring ready to strike. Zira flared her shimmering wings, creating a dazzling distraction that sent several guards stumbling backward. Elias seized the moment, lunging toward Admiral Rintal. If he could get close enough to confront her directly, maybe, just maybe, he could force her to confess in front of everyone. But before he could reach her, two burly guards tackled him to the ground, pinning him down with crushing force. You're persistent, Rintal said coolly, standing over him. I'll give you that. But persistence won't save you, or your friends. From his position on the floor, Elias glared up at her. Your plan will destroy the galaxy. Is power really worth that much? Rintal tilted her head, studying him as though he were an insect beneath a microscope. Power? No. Unity is my goal. The coalition is fractured, weak, riddled with distrust. I'm merely accelerating the inevitable, a reckoning that will weed out the unworthy and leave the strong standing. Her words sent a chill through the room. Even some of her own officers shifted uncomfortably, their loyalty wavering under the weight of her cold logic. Meanwhile, Kayla worked frantically from her remote location, hacking into the ship's internal systems. She had promised Elias support, and now was the time to deliver. Using the access codes stolen earlier, she triggered emergency overrides across the cruiser, causing lights to flicker and alarms to blare louder than ever. The confusion gave Mara and Cord the opening they needed to disarm several guards, turning the tide slightly in their favor. Zira, meanwhile, darted between consoles, broadcasting snippets of Rintal's earlier confession over the shipwide intercom. Fragments of her chilling declaration echoed through the corridors, tearing it apart first. Over and over, the words played, planting seeds of doubt among those who heard them. Back in the command center, Elias twisted free from the guard's grip, landing a solid punch on one of them. He scrambled to his feet, grabbing a fallen blaster and firing warning shots to keep the remaining guards at bay. "Listen to yourselves," he yelled, addressing both the officers and the guards. "She's using you to betray the very people you swore to protect." For a moment, silence fell. Then, unexpectedly, one of the junior officers stepped forward, lowering his weapon. "He's right," the officer said, his voice trembling. "If what we've seen is true, Admiral, how could you?" Rintal's expression darkened. "Traitors," she spat, drawing her own sidearm. "You'll all regret this." Before she could act, Kayla's voice crackled over the comm system, not just for Elias, but broadcast throughout the ship. "Attention all personnel. This is Kayla Zoreth. What you're hearing and seeing is real. Admiral Rintal has been working with the Veil to destabilize the galaxy. The evidence is undeniable. Choose wisely where your loyalties lie." The effect was immediate. Murmurs spread through the command center as officers and crew members began questioning orders. Some remained loyal to Rintal, while others sided with Elias. Factions formed, allies turned enemies, and the once unified command structure crumbled into disarray. Elias locked eyes with Rintal, who still clutched her weapon tightly. "It's over," he said firmly. "Surrender or face the consequences." Rintal smirked, though there was desperation behind her eyes. "Over? No, Captain. It's only beginning." With that, she fired, not at Elias, but at the console beside her, triggering a cascade of sparks and smoke. The lights dimmed, plunging the room into near darkness. When they flickered back on seconds later, Rintal was gone, vanished into the shadows. Elias cursed under his breath. They had exposed her treachery, but the fight was far from over. And somewhere aboard Orion's Pride, Rintal was regrouping, plotting her next move. The hidden access tunnel was cramped and suffocating, its walls slick with condensation. Elias crouched low, his breath coming in shallow gasps as he navigated the narrow passage. The distant hum of machinery reverberated through the metal, masking the sound of his movements, at least for now. His mind raced, piecing together his next move. He had evidence of Rintal's betrayal, but it wasn't enough to stop her. Not yet. Kayla's voice crackled over the comms device again. "You still alive down there?" "Barely," Elias replied, his tone sharp with exhaustion. "What's the plan? I can't stay hidden forever." There was a pause before she answered. "Get to the command center. That's where Rintal will be holed up, issuing orders like the puppet master she is. If we expose her directly, force her hand, it might shake loose some of her loyalists. But you'll need backup." "I'm open to suggestions," Elias muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. "Head toward Section 8, Kayla instructed. "I've rallied a few crew members who believe your story. They're waiting for you near the auxiliary control room. Be careful. The corridors are crawling with security drones." Elias nodded to himself, even though she couldn't see him. "Understood. I'll meet them there." Climbing out of the tunnel, he found himself in a quieter part of the ship. The red warning lights had dimmed, replaced by the usual cool glow of overhead panels. Still, tension hung thick in the air. Every corner felt like a potential ambush. Moving cautiously, Elias made his way toward Section 8, avoiding patrols and ducking into alcoves whenever footsteps echoed nearby. When he finally reached the auxiliary control room, 3 figures stood waiting. A human woman with short cropped hair, an avian alien with shimmering feathers, and a burly reptilian soldier. All wore expressions of grim determination. "You're Captain Venn?" the human asked, her voice steady despite the danger. "That's me," Elias confirmed. "And you are?" "Lieutenant Mara," she said, gesturing to the others. "This is Zyra and Kor. We've seen the intel you leaked. It's horrifying. What do you need us to do?" Elias wasted no time. "We take the fight to Rintal. Confront her in the command center. She needs to know we're onto her, and that her plans won't succeed." Mara hesitated. She's got guards everywhere. How do we get past them? Zura, the avian, spread her wings slightly. Distraction. I can create noise on the upper levels, draw attention away from the main route. Kor cracked his knuckles. And I'll handle anyone who tries to stop us. It was a risky plan, but Elias didn't have the luxury of caution. Let's move. The group split up, each playing their part. Zira soared upward, using ventilation shafts to reach higher decks, while Kor and Mara accompanied Elias through the labyrinthine corridors. Their progress was slow but steady, marked by moments of heart-stopping tension when they narrowly avoided detection. Finally, they reached the double doors leading to the command center. Inside, Admiral Rintal sat at the helm, surrounded by officers and guards. Her icy demeanor betrayed no hint of fear or doubt. Elias stepped forward, his voice ringing out. Admiral Rintal, your conspiracy ends here. Rintal turned slowly, her lips curling into a smirk. Captain Ven, how predictable. This ship carries weapons meant to destroy entire worlds, Elias continued, holding up the secure drive. And you're planning to hand them over to the Veil. Why? For power. Control. Rintal rose from her seat, her gaze piercing. You think you understand politics, soldier. This galaxy is fractured, weak. Someone must unite it, even if it means tearing it apart first. Her words sent a chill down Elias's spine. She truly believed in her twisted vision. Before he could respond, alarms blared once more. Zyra's distraction had worked, but it also alerted reinforcements. Guards poured into the room, weapons drawn. You've played your hand, Captain, Rintal said coldly. Now watch as mine wins. As chaos erupted around him, Elias realized one thing. Exposing the truth wouldn't be easy, but giving up wasn't an option.